Today on the Startup Basement, we're going to be talking about the biggest challenges and opportunities that currently exist in the 5G industry. Find out how solving some of these problems could be a lucrative opportunity for you, the inspiring entrepreneur or investor. Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? Arafat Shabazz here. We're going to be breaking down the top challenges in the 5G industry. So those top challenges we're going to be breaking down in depth for you today is going to be spectrum bidding, millimeter wave limits, high build-out costs, and of course, new regulations and new security requirements. We're going to break down exactly how these challenges also represent opportunities for inspiring entrepreneurs looking to start a business or investors looking to invest in public companies. All that and more today on the Startup Basement.
You are watching the Startup Basement TV.
The future is now. On this YouTube channel, I will research and analyze the missing links between business, industry, and technology. Together, let's build the next big thing.
5G promises to accelerate cellular data transfer speeds from 100 megabytes per second to 10 gigabytes per second and beyond. 5G uses new and so far rarely used radio millimeter bands in the 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz range. 5G is roughly 20 times faster than 4G and offers a minimum peak download speed of 20 gigabytes per second. That's super fast. Now, before we get into the details, I want people to know what 5G actually is. First of all, 5G is an incremental natural evolution of the internet. First, there was analog voice in the 1980s, which is 1G. Then digital voice like cell phones, which is 2G. Then mobile data, which is 3G. And then in the 2010, there came mobile broadband, which is fast internet on your phone, which we have today is 4G. And then the natural evolution to that is 5G, which is your wireless edge. We're talking 10 gigabytes per second internet. Now, why are they making such a big deal of 5G compared to 4G, 3G, 2G, and 1G? Well, 5G represents a paradigm shift. If you think about all the new futuristic technology that we're all looking forward to, self-driving cars, delivery drones, Internet of Things, AI, quantum computing, smart cities, all of these exciting futuristic technologies will be dependent on 5G internet. One major challenge that the 5G industry is currently facing is spectrum bidding. It's a very competitive process that's very difficult to obtain new licenses. So basically, spectrum planning starts as an international process. A long time ago, the world has come together to split up the right to broadcast radio waves in open air into 3 regions of the world: Region 1, 2, and 3. The USA is in Region 2. Within Region 2 is a whole bunch of North American countries. Between those countries, they divide up the right to broadcast certain frequencies. One of the hallmarks of the United States is democracy. And so we're highly competitive here. And lots of companies are clamoring for contracts or the right to broadcast or create new spectrum. Fundamentally, the major challenge with 5G spectrum auctions is really simple. It's basically the big guys have all the power. Take Verizon and AT&T. They make up over 30 to 40% of the entire spectrum ownership with private companies. Verizon alone in 2020 and 2021 is going to bid for $20 billion worth of 5G spectrum. And collectively between T-Mobile, AT&T, and Comcast, they're going to be bidding for over $47 billion worth of 5G spectrum. So if you're a small, tiny company or even a mid-sized company, the probability of you getting that spectrum over somebody with $20 billion of war chest is very, very low. At the end of the day, wireless carriers know if they can secure spectrum for the next 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, that's pretty much solidifying their place in being a dominant player in 5G and mobile products. As we move into the 5G world, one of the major challenges is going to be figuring out how to properly and fairly allocate access to 5G spectrum instead of letting the larger guys basically dominate most of the spectrum access. There's two concepts that come to mind. Number one, there's dynamic spectrum sharing. And then secondly, there's a concept called dynamic spectrum auctions, which currently don't exist. By introducing dynamic spectrum sharing in existing LTE or 4G low frequency bands, operators can take 5G nationwide much more quickly than any previous technology generation. And the way they do that is by using optimization software that switches by millimeters of a second between 5G and 4G on the same spectrum or on the same line or running on the same track. And that would allow companies to start building out their 5G network long before winning an auction from the government that can take years to get access to, not to mention billions of dollars. Dynamic spectrum sharing does allow existing large operators to take advantage of 5G now, but it doesn't solve the central problem of fairness. How do smaller and mid-sized companies get access to more spectrum when governments like the FCC are issuing licenses to large institutions like Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast, who have billions of dollars, who are tying up access to those spectrums for years through contracts? One of the ways to potentially solve this in the future, entrepreneurs, and you should be thinking about this, is a concept called dynamic spectrum auctions. Very similar to dynamic spectrum sharing, what a dynamic spectrum auction would be is most likely some type of software platform that allow spectrum winners of auctions like Verizon to resell access or lease access to their spectrum to smaller players. Here's how it would basically work. Dynamic spectrum sharing, basically a government institution allocates spectrum channels to a set of primary operators. That could be Verizon. The primary operator serve their users and sell or lease unutilized spectrum to a set of secondary operators. That could be a smaller player. These in turn provide service to a set of secondary users. Operators and users can exchange spectrum channels to satisfy their dynamic varying spectrum needs. So basically, you're going to have a lot of different people needing access to spectrum, and each operator who's selling spectrum have customers using different areas of the spectrum: cell phone users, big data users, internet users. So that requires different access to different spectrum channels. It's much more efficient to have a computerized system that could automatically sell off and switch between the different needs of different operators. And that can be done similar to the electrical grid. So if you're a technical entrepreneur, somebody who's highly technical that want to look into this area, then they need somebody to write optimization algorithms and software that can basically do all of this, very similar to the electrical grid. Now, keep in mind, this would be a very large project. You would probably need millions of dollars to pull this off. You'll probably need to be able to talk to governments to get them to use your system. However, this is a need that is most likely going to be dealt with in the future because there's trillions of dollars at stake in this 5G future, and eventually this is going to be coming up as a major issue. Another major challenge in the 5G industry is the limited range of high frequency millimeter waves and the high build out cost of 5G infrastructure. 5G will utilize higher radio frequencies that transport more data across shorter distances. For this to function properly, additional small cell antennas and repeaters will be needed to extend the reach of this limited waveform. Not only that, but infrastructure upgrades are going to be necessary to accommodate 5G and are estimated to be in the ballpark of $1 trillion of investment alone. In all, if you take in consideration infrastructure costs, labor costs, cost to buy spectrum from the FCC, and R&D investment, many mobile operators like Verizon and equipment producers like Nokia are going to be under pressure to optimize operations and free up cash flow to fund this inevitable paradigm shift. Here are some of the challenges these operators are going to be facing. All right, guys, so let's understand this trend of 5G infrastructure, and let's understand what's really driving up 5G infrastructure costs for telecom providers. Now, what does that mean? That means that what is the cost breakdown of all the spending they have to do to expand 5G networks? Well, first of all, about less than half of all that spending will be just maintaining existing 4G and older generation LTE networks, right? So they got to spend money maintaining their current business. And then about a third of the cost will be basically spending on new domains to allow or facilitate 5G. So that's going to be your 5G macro layer, your small cells, and your massive MIMO that you need to set up in order to deliver 5G. The pace in which they have to build out the 5G network has to keep pace with all business and economy's technological innovation timescales. So what that essentially means is they have to build out the network fast enough to meet customer demand. There's a lot of industries that are currently innovating: autonomous cars, machine learning, smart cities, drones. All of these devices will be connecting to the internet. New type of devices will be connecting to the internet. Then there's the industrial revolution happening in the Internet of Things. You're going to have an industrial and business sector now having thousands of machines and robots connecting to the internet. All of this stuff requires a new type and different types and more sophisticated type of 5G networks. So now they're forced to deal with all these new demand and type of spectrums in a more sophisticated 5G network. And this stuff is super expensive for telecom providers to build out. So here's where the challenge comes in. The challenge comes in is telecom providers like AT&T and Verizon are in competition, and they have to get these new infrastructures built out that can deal with all the different type of new demand that they're going to be getting. And if they don't do it faster than the next guy, then the industry and businesses are going to go to the person who does. So now a third issue comes in for these telecom providers, which is they have limited capital. This stuff costs billions of dollars. Buying an FCC spectrum license costs billions of dollars. Building out all this infrastructure costs billions of dollars. Time is not on their side because they have to keep up with consumer demand for these different, more sophisticated networks. So now they have to figure out, how do I manage revenue? How do I optimize operations where I can fund this 5G build out efficiently? And it's a significant challenge that they're kind of working out. And that is basically what's driving this expansionary 5G network build out for telecom providers. So from an entrepreneur perspective, where are the opportunities? Well, the opportunities lie in the challenges, right? Because these are the big challenges these companies are basically facing. They know there's a lot of money waiting on them, and they need to overcome these challenges efficiently. So the best business for you to start is a business that directly helps them overcome those challenges. You should be thinking from an entrepreneurial perspective, how can you help telecom providers reduce costs of 5G build out? That's the first thing. Can you come up with an innovation when it comes to building small cells? Can you make them more competitive? Can you make them more efficient? Can you come up with an innovation that helps the 5G layer basically perform better, which is basically going to reduce costs ultimately for them? Can you offer a construction team that can efficiently and cost effectively build out massive MIMO towers for them? That's going to essentially make those challenges easier for these telecom providers to deal with. And secondly, because of this infrastructure cost, they have to get the money from somewhere. Telecom providers are businesses and they have customers. And most of the time when they need to fund out projects, the obvious place to go is to pass the cost on to the customer. Well, businesses would like to avoid that and make their customers happy. So from an entrepreneurial perspective, you should be thinking, how can I create new opportunities for these telecom communicators to make new business, maybe even outside of going to their own customers? Right? And then allow them to really raise capital to help fund the 5G infrastructure build out. So that's another way you can think about this. And then lastly, you should think about it. How can you help telecom providers build out the 5G infrastructure? For the next 10 years, they're going to be spending billions of dollars rapidly expanding, building this stuff out. This stuff requires the construction teams to physically go into the field and install infrastructure. You can set up a team of people who could do it efficiently, manage them, and you know that there's going to be business opportunity or contract opportunities for the next 10 years building out this infrastructure. So that's how you think about these challenges, and that's how you connect it to entrepreneurial ideals. Internet spectrum is a limited resource that should be fairly allocated throughout society. Currently, the FCC is still allocating spectrum to the highest bidder, which could disproportionately favor large and wealthy enterprises. On top of that, bad policy exists that does not allow holders of spectrum to sell. This faulty policy means lots of good usable spectrum exists, but no one can sell it without the approval of the FCC. As more and more 5G comes online, competition for spectrum is only going to intensify. One regulatory challenge that could complicate ongoing 5G infrastructure development is reduced privacy due to enhanced location tracking. Smartphones know where you are based on how close you are to a near cell tower. Here's the issue. 5G use short millimeter waves with limited range. Therefore, 5G requires an order of magnitude more cell towers in short distances from each other. What that means is as you're walking and passing different cell towers, your cell phone is constantly switching and connecting and updating to these different towers, which in turn is letting people know your location incrementally as you pass each tower. This opens up vulnerabilities for hackers or bad actors to stalk or track people through their cell phones. Because 5G is a pioneering new technology, there's currently no regulations or security specifically in place to close this loophole. Security is going to be a major issue across the board for 5G as we start to roll out this new evolutionary technology. And the reasons for this is much more larger than just tracking people's locations. Anytime new generation technology come out, new methodology come out, and new actual equipment comes out that open up new security threats. But I would say fundamentally, the biggest security threat to 5G and the 5G world is really the nature of the implementation. In order to make 5G work, you're going to have hundreds of thousands of small cell towers. I mean, double, triple, quadruple the amount of towers. That's quadruple the amount of attack points. Not only that, there's a confluence, a revolution happening in technology, from autonomous cars to machine learning to Internet of Things to the industrialization of sensors, and all of this data flow is going to be going through 5G networks. There's basically going to be more data to hack, more data to steal, and there's going to be more infrastructure, smaller infrastructure. Like I said, 5G has shortwave limitations, so that means they need repeaters, they need base stations every few miles, and so those are more attack points for hackers. So security is a significant issue for 5G rollout. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're interested in security, if you're a security professional, obviously looking for nuanced opportunities in this area, it's obviously going to be advisable, but 5G will be facing a significant security challenge in the future. Okay guys, you made it toward the finish line. Now we're going to talk about the top stocks to consider if you want to benefit from the 5G trend. But before we do that, I want to make something really clear about 5G. There's lots of people who see the beneficiaries of 5G as obvious players like the telecom equipment providers like Ericsson and Nokia, or the Verizon Wireless, the AT&T, the T-Mobiles, and Comcast. People think that they're the ones actually making the 5G possible, and in the short run, they're going to get all the benefit. But it's actually quite the opposite if you think about it from a logical perspective. Nokia, Verizon, Comcast, AT&T, all of these people have to go buy billions of dollars of spectrum access from the US government or the FCC. Spectrum access costs tens of billions of dollars to win the auction to actually get the right to broadcast that. Not only that, but companies like AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast, after spending billions of dollars on spectrum access, have to go build out infrastructure all around the city, state, and country. They have to go to companies like Nokia and Ericsson and buy very expensive equipment. They have to hire hundreds of thousands of workers to go out and install base stations, repeaters, and 5G towers in order to offer 5G to any of their customers. So once a significant area of 5G actually is built out where they can even start offering it, these companies have already spent billions of dollars up front on spectrum access and actually building out the equipment. So you have to follow the breadcrumbs in the short run if you want to benefit from investing in 5G and finding the right companies who are going to benefit in the short run, midterm, and long term. So Nokia and Ericsson, these are two companies you want to look at, with Ericsson being number one. It's the better company, it's better ran, it has more capital, and it has better technology. Then there's Nokia. They do the same thing. They sell that equipment, they sell those base stations, they sell those repeaters that Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Comcast, and many other companies are going to have to get from them. Now, one of the largest players of 5G is in China, but the US is currently banning them. So naturally, we have to defer to Ericsson and Nokia, which is a very good thing. As more and more 5G is getting built out, they're going to get more customers and more business needing their equipment. Secondly, if you want to invest in something from the 5G revolution, then you probably want to look at streaming companies, cloud gaming companies, and wearables or portable devices like Garmin. Garmin's a very good company. It's well diversified and it's selling a product and it already has a customer base. Let me give you an example. When they're actually build out a 5G network, let's say in Texas, now Garmin can start upgrading their product, their GPS product, whatever other products they're currently selling to their customers. Now they have 5G. With 5G, they could start upgrading their actual devices to do new things that they normally couldn't do on the 4G LTE. That's going to have an immediate impact on their customers. Their customers are going to be able to immediately get something new or something significantly better. You don't have to wait on an entire new industry. You don't have to wait on somebody creating an entirely new product that nobody's seen before. That's going to take time to market to new customers, convince them that it's useful. Instead, you should be looking for companies who can go benefit from 5G internet access soon as possible. Those are the companies that are going to actually be the companies that are going to be the big winners in the 1, 2, 3 years time scale. Let me give you an example. In order for Nokia, Verizon, Comcast to actually build out these networks, they may have to spend 20, 30, 40, 50 billion dollars. Now, even when they make more money from people buying their services, they're only going to be paying themselves back from all the money and loans that they already spent. So really, you're not going to necessarily see all of that revenue growth on their actual balance sheet. But think of companies like Netflix. When 5G is available, because of companies like Verizon, Nokia, and Comcast who made the investment for them, Netflix can now offer their customers a significantly better experience. No latency, instant downloads. You can watch any video no matter how long and how large on any phone. That's a massive benefit to their customers, and that's going to show up in their revenue. Think about companies who have the most to gain from faster internet that basically makes up low latency and high reliability. Now, what is the biggest benefit of 5G? It's not the internet speed. Actually, what it is the reliability and ultra low latency. Now, what does reliability mean? That means out of 1 billion messages that you send over a 5G network, it only have one error. So that means that when it sends data, it's going to get there. That's a big, big deal. Think about the future of 5G. Think about autonomous cars. In the future, you cannot have errors when machines are driving cars. If it's transferring data to a network, everything must be correct. Otherwise, you can kill human beings. That's why 5G is so important. It has high reliability. That means 1 out of 1 billion messages sent, it would only have an error one time. And secondly, ultra low latency. That's 1 millisecond of response time. So basically, the response time is almost instantaneous or live or real time. That's going to be critical for critical software systems. They're running aviation, that's running drones, and that's running self-driving. You cannot have delays and you cannot have messages not making it to the end of the network. Otherwise, that will result in crashes, which will result in killing people. That's why 5G is a big deal. Speed is a plus, but it's really the reliability and the ultra low latency. Now let's look at another example, streaming and cloud gaming. If Verizon, Comcast, and companies like Erica and Nokia are doing and investing all the money in building out the networks, a streaming company that allow you to play video games online, hosted in the cloud, now can be able to offer the same level games that you would play on your Sony PlayStation or your Xbox at home with no skipping, no lagging. It will be the same as owning the actual Xbox. However, now you could offer all these games and all these experiences online without your customers having to shell out $300, $400, $500 to buy the system. That is a paradigm shift for gaming. So when 5G becomes available, you should be looking at streaming companies and cloud gaming companies because they're going to be able to offer a significant value proposition over buying a physical Xbox, over buying a physical Sony PlayStation. They'll be able to get the same quality of gameplay as these physical consoles, and that's going to be a humongous shift and win for somebody who invests in the winner who does that. Lastly, 5G semiconductor company. 5G is basically wireless internet. Qualcomm is the market leader in creating 5G enabled network chips for cell phone. They have good contracts with Apple, who's a market leader in 5G phones. Remember, this is not financial advice. This is merely following the breadcrumbs of the challenges in the industry and connecting it with who's going to benefit when you invest into public companies. So go check out Qualcomm, go check out AMD, go check out Skyworks. These are very important companies. As more and more cell phones are getting access, they're going to need to be 5G ready, 5G capacity, and they're going to have to reach out to companies like Qualcomm, AMD, and Skyworks to get those 5G enabled chips. Okay guys, that's our show for today, and remember, the future is now. From Houston to Silicon Valley, from the basement of your mind to changing the world. I'm your host, Arafat Shabazz, and you have been watching the Startup Basement TV. Till next time, my friends.